Crimes and Consequences JLI course taught at the Hindu Institute. I'm Rachmiel Chaim Drizin, the facilitator for this class. And it's been an honor to be with you in 3 previous classes. We actually are going to have a final class, not next Wednesday night, which is Tisha B'Av, in which it would be, it's inappropriate to be learning things, even if it are of a sad nature, only things that are genuine to the destruction of the temples and the rebuilding in our minds. But the following week, on August 2nd, same time, 7 o'clock, there'll be an announcement sent out. Carlene will send them out, and we'll be finishing up the class. So we'll have a total of 5, but tonight is the 4th. And, you know, I'm a big believer in hashkachat pratit. That means that God, Hashem, is involved in the details in this world and the direction as such. So I generally do not listen to the news, but during the 3 weeks when I can't hear music, sometimes I'll turn it on. I always want to hear music, but I don't deal with music, whereas during this time, we're supposed to reduce our joy. So live music can bring us kind of joy. I don't play music, I listen. So I happened to just turn on WBEZ, and right up, I heard breaking news. And that breaking news is genuine to everyone who is in this class. The breaking news talks about false confessions. And as we're going to hear the news clip from WBEZ and see some of the video, it involves my brother, Stephen Drizin, who is a professor at Northwestern Law School, who I talked about. He did the Brendan Dassey case that we spent a lot of time with. And he doesn't speak exactly, but he's quoted a lot in this. This is a case that just came out today in which detectives in Waukegan basically facilitated the confession, false confession. Actually, I want you to go to the top first. I want to hear the news story first. Can you go to the top? Hear the news story first, and then we'll see the video with that. Okay, if you can do that, thank you.
Is supported by Jewel Osco, as Chicago's longtime grocer. This WBEZ podcast is supported by Jewel Osco. As Chicago's longtime grocer, Jewel Osco remains committed to offering shoppers additional savings on the items they buy most through the Jewel Osco For You digital app. Visit jewelosco.com for more details on signing up and saving $5 on a $25 purchase. Plus, each week, there are selected sizzling hot offers on fresh meat, premium produce, household items, and more through the Jewel Osco For You digital app.
This is WBEZ. After a judge's order in a WBEZ lawsuit, the city of Waukegan has released a video of the interrogation that led to a 15-year-old falsely confessing to a shooting last year. The interrogation lasted 43 minutes. The video shows the lead detective using deception and leading questions to steer the teen to incriminate himself. The police kept the teen in jail on charges including attempted murder until his basketball team proved he was 18 miles away from the shooting when it took place. WBEZ Chip Mitchell has been reporting on this case for more than a year. And Chip, you've been poring over this video and talking about it with experts on interrogations and wrongful convictions, kind of trying to make sense of how the detectives got this teen to confess to the shooting he could not have possibly committed. What have you learned?
Well, one of these experts is Stephen Drizin. He's a law professor at Northwestern University. He co-directs its Center on Wrongful Convictions. He watched the interrogation and broke it down into 4 key errors. So, for example, Waukegan's lead detective on this case, his name's Sean Ains. He read the teenager his Miranda rights, the right to remain silent, to have an attorney, and so on. But Professor Drizin pointed out that the detective negated almost every one of those rights as soon as he read them. So, for example, the detective said the teen doesn't have anything to fear by talking, and he said it would take a while to get the teen a lawyer. Drizin said it was clear the teen wouldn't want to wait.
And Professor Stephen Drizin also said detectives erred when they told the teen some shooting suspects get to go home after they confess.
Yeah, Drizzen says juvenile suspects believing they get to go home after agreeing to a story the detectives are telling him. He says it's the number one reason why teenagers falsely confess. Now, the lead detective lays out that deception in this clip from the interrogation video.
You reacting to maybe someone committing a crime or an offense against you versus you going out and being the aggressor and seriously harming somebody, two totally different scenarios. People walk out of this building after shooting people because they explained the context of the situation. They explained it was a self-defense scenario, and look, I thought my life was in danger. I've driven people home that have shot people before. They never spent a day in jail.
That was Waukegan Detective Sean Ains interrogating the 15-year-old. And Chip, you said Drizzen identified four main things that the detective did wrong here to kind of extract this false confession. Like we heard, the detective negated the teen's Miranda rights. He suggested there would be leniency if he confessed. And he also inflated the evidence that they had against the teen, right?
Yeah, and Melba, at several points in the interrogation, this lead detective feeds the 15-year-old key facts about the shooting instead of seeing whether the teen can come up with any of them on his own.
So maybe your memory isn't great. I'm trying to give you little facts about the situation and maybe you can remember exactly what happened, okay? There was a Hispanic dude, like maybe 5'10", 6 foot, he's wearing a hoodie. He kind of it looks to me like he put you out of the store. Not physically, but when you got to the door, he closed the doors, and there was some kind of like altercation at the doors. And this was at the Dollar General on Grand Avenue. Okay?
And Chip, what's the city of Waukegan saying about all of this?
Well, we sent the analysis of this video, this interrogation that led to the teen's false confession to the shooting. We sent it to the lead detective, to several police bosses, and to Waukegan Mayor Ann Taylor. We haven't heard back. Now, in the past, her office has said police commanders and an outside consulting firm found the detective did not violate any law or policy.
Thanks for bringing us this update, Chip.
My pleasure.
That's WBEZ reporter Chip Mitchell. This is WBEZ.
Thank you, Michael. You can cut that off.
You're listening to WBEZ. Illinois will be the first state to abolish cash bail.
So that's also another story, but not for right now. If you want to look at the video, you can copy the link that's in the chat, and you'll be able to get to this scene here. I don't want to spend any more time on this, but we heard the problematic parts. What are some of the reactions that we have to what we just heard? I'm interested in hearing what you just heard. Yes, please, Aryeh, that this boy is lucky. He is very, very lucky that the whole team was saying, not him. He was 18 miles away. He also got WBEZ involved and lawyers involved. He is lucky. 15-year-olds who are arrested for the first time and told that they can leave if they sign something and say something are going to do that. And that, in my experience as a public defender, I had that for young kids saying things. My brother could tell story after story after story. Michael, please.
I'm sorry, this is not a reaction, it's a request.
Yeah.
There's someone named Zoom user who has joined. Could you identify yourself, please, so I can have you be recognized?
Aryeh, you're back consent to waiving of their rights. It's like the same mind is working. You know, it's a tremendous issue. We want to protect them, but they also want to get them. So a lot. It's a real problem. The fact that we learned about this case, about a case like this, about a false confession, the fact that and then this is just breaking news today. I literally heard it like an hour ago, and I wrote to my brother. My brother said, "Look at the website. You can put this on." So I encourage you to copy in the chat. There's a link there if you want to see. I don't want to spend more time on this because that was another subject, but it's very problematic to see how police in 2022, 2023 are still using these same things, these same techniques, and they're called on it. And the boy is lucky because he obviously said he did it when he could physically not have done it. Comment now, Michael?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for identifying yourself, Dave. You know, but the police have so much authority. And what makes it particularly egregious is that it's a kid, a minor. I mean, the authorities are constantly harping on the importance of protecting minors, right? I mean, it's a very prevalent theme, particularly currently, and that's great. That's fine. Protect minors. They don't have the mental wherewithal to. I mean, even a lot of adults are not necessarily perfectly informed, but obviously children, minors have less expectation of being so informed and so less able to defend themselves. So the fact that he was being manipulative, there's also the issue of partial immunity, uh, as regards the authority, that a government agent who is doing, who is performing a service as a government agent is largely immune from lawsuits in the course of delivering said actions. And
Qualified
so that's
immunity.
another issue.
Qualified immunity. Yeah, it's called
Qualified immunity. Thank you for, yeah. So
and
that
that's
just want to bring
so
that up. Thank you.
it's a problem if he's acting under color of law, whereas for example, like if he was an off-duty cop and he just like grabbed somebody, put a gun in his mouth and started telling the story, he would not be acting in his capacity. But if he's working and doing that, he is generally protected from any kind of Section 1983 suit, civil rights suit against him. So I just figured this was just too important, something that we spent a lot of time 2 sessions ago talking about, not to bring it to attention. Also, that my brother is very much involved, and I just wasn't making that up. Tonight, we're going to go to something which, unfortunately, is very close to a lot of people in this room, either personally or through the loved ones that you who have been in institutions. And it's about moving forward, reacceptance and the criminal background check. Now I'm going to tell you a personal story. Why did I become a public defender? Right? Why did I become a public defender? So when I was in law school, Northwestern Law School, they opened up IM Magnums in 1983 on Michigan Avenue. Big new thing. And so I walked in there, they had a hair salon, and I walked up to them and I decided boldly, you know what? I will pass out flyers for discount haircuts at my law school, and we work out a deal. And they said, okay, every 5 ones that come in, you will get a free haircut. Well, guess what? A ton of people did. And I got throughout all law school and well into my career, I was getting free haircuts there because a lot of people from my law school wanted to get a discount. They brought it in and they kept the track. And I did that for years. I had a good hairstylist there. Okay. She left and she went to Marshall Fields. Right. I stopped getting a haircut there for a while, but my girlfriend was getting there. She said, oh, this person is there. I went back and I started getting haircuts there. All right. And since I'd known her for about 7 or 8 years, we had this kind of thing. She said, you know what? Don't wait in line to pay. Just leave the money by me and I'll take care of it. Okay. I always tip really well. I don't know, maybe this is the early 90s. It's like 1992. February 92. All right. So I would leave the money by her and I would walk out. Right. So one day in middle 1992, I'm doing this. And as I'm leaving, I get a haircut. I get handcuffed and taken down into the basement, put in front of a guy who was giving me the Reed techniques of interrogation, always like this whole psychological thing to try to get me to say that I was stealing haircuts and they had done it before, called theft of retail services. What? No. I said, what exactly I did all the time. Can I talk to her? No. Can I talk to her? Bang, bang, bang. Chicago, please take me down to 11th and State. I'm there. I'm bailed out for $100. And here it is. I am charged before public defender. Charged with theft of retail services. What? I tried calling her. She won't pick up the phone. I was told I wasn't allowed to go to Marshall Fields as part of that, so I didn't go there. My lawyer tries to talk to her, nothing. We had the first court date. No one shows up. She doesn't show up. Okay. As I'm told from his attorney, she didn't want to testify, whatever that means, because she was actually the one to supposedly, and the case was dropped out. The fact that I could be charged when I was completely innocent got me, something's a problem with this. I became a public defender. So why am I saying this? Because I'm a chaplain for Hinda, and I go to Cook County. And I want to become a full volunteer, and they have to fill out a background check. So have you ever been arrested? And I was writing no, and oh, that's right. That's what happened. So I know about this topic intimately because I had to fill out, because if I said nothing, they run my name. They see back in 1992, I was arrested for misdemeanor theft of retail services. No, there's like 2 court dates. I've looked that up in years. Like there's like first date, and there's case SOL, stricken off leave because no witness came, because she wasn't going to testify because guess what? She was probably pocketing the money. I don't know how that happened. I don't know the details about that. I never got discovery because she never showed up and the case was stricken off leave. So we're learning about the criminal background check that unfortunately, many of you here who applied for jobs, many of you can't hold certain jobs, and family members who can, because each year, hundreds of thousands of Americans are released from prisons. They want to rejoin society, but they're stymied by the public availability of their criminal records. And so we want to learn today about striking a proper balance between the needs of society, prospective employers, and ex-offenders. So the question I want to put out right here, how can we, as an initial question, take short answers? How can we balance the right of employers to protect themselves against potential harm with the need to provide ex-offenders with a way to make an honest living? How do we strike this balance? I want to hear some initial responses. This balance, because we'd all agree that employers need to know some information. We'd all agree that ex-offenders have the right to work at a certain place. How can we strike that balance? Michael, your hand is up first, please.
Yeah, thanks. I've thought a lot about this for my own reasons, and because I work with Hinda and a lot of people who are often struggling with finding employment. And part of the problem is the way that risk is assessed is very broad, very general, and very undiscerning. And so that's one issue, the criteria. The other issue is the institutions who are involved in assessing risk in determining employment outcomes. So for example, I have had interactions with the Society for Human Resource Management. I am looking to try to establish interactions with the insurance industry, which has a big say in what Shroom decides. And then there's the whole, world of employers themselves. That world now is starting to change, but the problem is institutionally and systemically, they're often held back by those other factors, insurance and human resources, and the way that codes and laws are written, all based on the assumption that, if you violated any law at all, or if you violated the law, but it was 10, 15, 20 years ago, then you're so much of a risk that we're going to consider you the same as if you murdered someone yesterday. I mean, that's kind of the upshot. They're so risk averse, they don't make meaningful distinctions. So there needs to be a more sophisticated and sensible protocol for assessing risk. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Jeremy, your comments, please, about the balance. You got to unmute yourself, please. And I think an important thing is there a way to evaluate whether an offender has changed? Now, another breaking news today, there was a guy who was a kid who was falsely imprisoned, and he came out. He was innocent of the crime. I think of murder, falsely imprisoned, false. I don't know if it was a confession or not. So he made like millions of dollars in the settlement because he was innocent. He was in jail for like maybe 20 years. He got out and he used that money to recruit gangsters. And like a couple of years ago, he was like riding on the street and there was some guy outside. And he said, I'm going to blaze, and he shot him in the leg. All right. And the defense attorney, very good, said, I heard say today that, this guy kind of like learned to be a hardened criminal in prison. So this guy was innocent. But the question is there a way to evaluate whether an offender has changed. How do we know that? If you can comment on that, our REA, as well as the initial question, please, about the balance, whatever you like. To talk about Judaism, and I'll call in some hands later, but I want to get to some text about this, because we talked about Judaism last week. Yeah, thank you. About the Torah's theory, guiding theory of punishment was rehabilitation for the sake of helping the criminal or the past detainee live up to the divine image and mission that God had given us. So it's all about rehabilitation, which we are calling teshuvah, return here. Now, the problem is that the United States has a system which is very different, because the restrictions placed on criminals does not end when they complete their formal sentence and release from prison. Can I have the first slide, please, Michael? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So we all understand what this is. In many, voting rights are affected, driving license are affected, benefits are affected, firearm ownership are affected. All these things, depending upon the kind of crime and level of crime committed, some of these make you ineligible for this. You can't get certain welfare benefits, can't practice law, can't do certain things. But some of these formal consequences can be indirect. I'm not sure why we're listening to this right now, but we'll get that eventually. Like, like some occupations have licensing that you can't get as a criminal, as an ex detainee. So as you got to show that you had good moral character. And then there's intangible consequences, like social stigma. Ex-offenders are often met with disdain, and resentment, and not trust. And this is also passed on to family members, as many of you know, because if a family member commits something, you are considered to be the same. And finally, there are informal tangential consequences, like potential employers will turn you down application just because of a criminal record, even if it is unrelated to the specific job opening. So do landlords. Landlords will turn you down also. So there are severe consequences that the people on this Zoom know, both formal, informal, intangible, and informal, tangible. Very difficult consequences affected. I want to go and show you a little video here that talks about this. And you put the video now, which we might be hearing from. If you can pick that up, please, Michael, and then we'll take some more questions, please, or comments. Thank you.
You drive under the influence and are pulled over. Everything that happens next, including your arrest, conviction, and incarceration, is registered with the police department and the courts. Long after you've put the incident behind you, your records remain preserved in their...
So we got that data that we seen that was from 2012. Did you find better data, Michael? I think you might be muted, Michael. You are muted.
Bring it right up.
Yeah, good. Michael was kind to get some more updated data from 2023, 2022 about the amount of background checks that are being done.
Oh, yes, sir. Okay. Share this now with...
So, as of 2018, the great majority of organizations, 92%, conduct background checks mostly at the pre-employment stage, which 87%. Nearly all screens are searches for criminal records, 98%. And 15% of the organizations said that they rescreen workers annually. 13 perform checks when triggered by an event, and 10% screen when someone is promoted or changes jobs. It is amazing at the amount of background checks that are going on right now. And I'm going to ask Jeremy for a comment because he's had his hand up for a while. Jeremy, please. Michael?
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks. It is interesting to me that, and I understand why it is, that those who are seeking to employ released detainees or people with a criminal record tend to be the trades. And I find that so interesting. And, that people, for example, had licensures. I was in the Fed, so I knew quite a few people who had licensures, had been attorneys, bankers, accountants, teachers, real estate brokers and insurance agents, etc. And the interesting thing is that very few of them offered a path to restoration, so that these people who had often an abundance of knowledge, experience, and really wanted to contribute back after having served their time and made their restitution, I suppose, could then apply that knowledge and expertise to doing good in society. So it is absurd to me that the collateral consequences should be so blanket and so heavy upon people. Look, I understand that 80 to 90% of prisoners probably are people who, I mean, this is my observation experience, maybe have a high school diploma. A lot of them get their GEDs in prison. Fine, I get that. Maybe their best option is trades for the most part. But then there's also this significant percentage, which is probably not that different than the percentage of society overall, who are educated and whose viability in those fields is so compromised as to be essentially destroyed. And I think that's wrong. And so, we had a white collar group for a while with Hinda. I'll end it with that. But, I do know some specific examples. And Linda, you pointed to someone, Microsoft, that we actually had a woman who did prison time and works for Microsoft and is very successful. Thank God. And that's great for her. I think she's in sales. Wonderful. But what about I know specifically a doctor who, in a moment of weakness, sold pharmaceutical drugs to an adult woman in return for favors, and he was busted by the DEA. He did 2 years of state time. And the only way that this extremely knowledgeable, sensitive Jewish doctor, former, could get his doctor could practice medicine again was this one program in Mississippi where he could only practice in Mississippi under tutelage after 5 years. And that's largely because Mississippi had so few doctors per capita that they were desperate. But he was ready, willing, and able to apply his healing anywhere. And so why shouldn't he be able to do that after having served his time? It absolutely makes no sense to me at all, especially when there are so many people who are underserved. Thank you.
Thank you. Aharon, I'll get to you, but I first want to I'll give this to the group. Now, I have a sense that this group is going to have a different view about this situation, but I want to put forth a true example. It's an example of an ex-convict who felt he was unfairly denied a job. So, Neil Cardoso applied for a job as a chauffeur shortly after conviction and brief incarceration in New York City for white-collar crime. Cardoso was offered a position only to have it rescinded after a criminal background check was done. He said this: "They wanted me, they loved me, the people did the hiring wanted to start me right away. Then the HR did the background check, and that was the last part of the hiring process. The company saw his white-collar conviction and declined to hire him. Cardoso takes umbrage at the fact that the job had nothing to do with the offense in which he was convicted. Quote, I had no fiduciary responsibilities as a chauffeur. I would just be driving people around." So Question one, would you give him a job as a chauffeur? Two, what jobs would you give him despite his criminal conviction? And number three, would there be jobs you would not give him due to his criminal conviction? Number one, should he be a chauffeur? Number two, what jobs would you give him? And number three, what jobs would you not give him because he had a white collar crime conviction? Would there be any? And I'll tell you, maybe I'll ask the next slide, please. Maybe you mean to skip one. We want to get to the Neil Cardoza slide, Michael, and then I'll call on you in 1 second. That's it. So here, Neil Cardoza, white collar conviction. Guess what? That job his conviction has nothing to do with chauffeuring. But as Aaron said, he's unscrupulous with money. That could be an issue. Michael, any comment about this?
Yeah, I mean, this kind of goes, I like what Aaron said about, obviously, if your issue is with being entrusted with finances, obviously chauffeuring does not have that. But I would like to take issue in part with the idea of not being in a white collar field at all, because not all white collar fields have to do with financial management. For example, medicine or insurance kind of has to do with money, but not necessarily, or teaching, or any number, being an architect or a real estate broker, right? Now, real estate broker, maybe, but, maybe not. I mean, there's some ambiguity there. But clearly, that not all white-collar jobs involve the handling of money, and so therefore should be accessible to someone who, despite a past malfeasance involving finances, is ready, willing, able to change and do better. Why couldn't that person teach at a community college? Teach about finance, teach about statistics, or marketing or something.
Share the expertise. So when we talk about the spreading of true information, Jewish tradition has a name for that. True information that has a bad effect. It's called Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara means evil speech, literally bad tongue or wicked tongue. Lashon Hara is when you say something true about someone that affects them negatively. And the Torah has two interesting laws. One is from Leviticus 19:16, you shall not go around as a gossip monger amongst your people. What is gossip? Gossip is saying things that are true that reflects poorly on somebody. All right. It does not refer to the invention of lies. That's defamation or slander. Lashon Hara is someone who sits and says, guess what so-and-so did? There's no difference whether you say it in front of someone or not. Jewish law is very much against Lashon Hara within certain exceptions. To prevent harm is the biggest one. I am allowed to say to Michael, do not hire Joe something because when he worked for me, he stole from me. I am allowed to say that to prevent harm. All right. I could say, Michael, do not date Amy C. because Amy C, when she was with me, she cheated on me. I am allowed to say that to prevent harm. But at the same time, it says this in Leviticus 19:16, you shall not stand by the shedding of your fellow's blood. That means that you are not only obligated to intervene to save someone's life, but to save others from other form of damage. Can I have the next slide, please? So this is interesting here. It's a balance, all right? You're not allowed to be a gossip monger. Did you hear what it is? But I can't, if I know that Michael's going to go into business with someone that I know has harmed others financially. Or for example, if I know that he's looking to hire someone who went to jail for a white collar crime, this is before we had all this information. I would be may have to. I cannot stand by and let something bad. And so the law for sharing information, this isn't Jewish law. It's a much, much more specific than what we have in American law with all these background checks. You can only share information if there is a specific need to do so. Michael, you have a comment on this?
Yes, I put a link into chat from related to something in Pirkei Avot, which
Okay.
had been, which I discovered in prison actually, and from that point and going forward has been such an inspiration to me in terms of the wisdom and values that it promotes. And what I found so interesting, having read a little bit about reputation and how it is linked as if a Venn diagram overlap to the idea of actually just being alive. The idea of destroying a reputation is very much related to the idea of destroying a person, to destroying that person's life, uh, maybe even resulting in their death. And I think American law, American society does not recognize sufficiently that overlap and that dependency, but Jewish law does.
Thank you. Aryeh? About people unless it is necessary in order to prevent harm. If there are reasonable grounds to suspect that a particular person will cause some form of harm to a prospective employer, the prohibition of Lashon Hara does not apply. So again, if I knew that someone had stolen money from the till and that person was going to work in your supermarket as a cashier, I would be allowed to say that. Now, how does it apply to background checks? Over here, it's a balance here between society's right to know. That's what background checks. But Judaism believes there's a need to know. First of all, there has to be relevant crimes and the time elapsed. So the prohibition of Lashon Hara is very different than society's right to know. We think that you can only let people know if there is an objective need. There's a need to know. It's very different. So accordingly, these sweeping background checks, which say everything and everything, all right, that you could have done, all right, is a problem with Jewish law because it's not, there needs to be a need to know. And not everything is a need to know. Again, the guy Cardoso, who wanted to be a chauffeur and but he was a white collar criminal. Very different, very, very different thing. Almost apples and oranges. Can I have the next slide, please? Another important thing is, for example, the likelihood of rearrest. All right. We're told that once 7.5 years had passed without reoffense, a person was no more likely than the average man on the street to be arrested for crime. So, for example, look at the crime on the left. 18 years old, arrested for robbery. All right. 25 years old, he has his likelihood to do it as anybody. All right. All right. That's with a certain crime as robbery. Now, with aggravated assault, a physical thing, all right, it's just 4.3 years. All right. Can you click on the screen? Maybe things will change. I got something about clicks on the screen. I'm not sure if the numbers are coming up. Maybe it's not working. Okay. So aggravated assault, a physical attack, is only 4.3 clean years. All right. So on the right, aggravated assault, if someone is 18 years old, all right, and they do not commit a crime and afterwards, by the time they're 22, they are as likely as anyone else to commit a crime of aggravated assault. Robbery is 7 years, 8 years. So and with burglary, it's just 3.8 years. The likelihood of rearrest diminishes upon the amount of time that you go without committing anything, which is what we talk about. We want to have these background checks that could throw you off a job, all right? Let's say robbery, aggravated assault, or burglary, forever. You're arrested for robbery at 18. forget it. It's on your thing. For assault, it could forget it. But we actually know background checks in America have been done because of society's need to know. Judaism is about a need to know. And Judaism looks to see if someone has done, the magic word is teshuvah. Someone does robbery and does not do it again in 7.5 years, unlikely is going to do it again. Someone does aggravated assault, 4.3 years, unlikely to do it. And burglary, after 3.8 years, unlikely. Judaism would say that person has been doing teshuvah, and after that period of time, they should not be held against for something they did, particularly when they're an 18-year-old man whose brain chemistry is not the same as it should be, and has had a clean slate. Any comments about this? And in general, it's like, I mean, as you know, you've been like what 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-olds do, all right, is very different than people older. They'll take risks. They're not thinking about consequences. You know, it's kind of shame to see that in the city of Chicago downtown, it's a lot more dangerous than it was when I was working down there 3 years ago before I retired. It is, and there are like bands of young kids, and they feel emboldened by the fact that they could get someone's wallet and just run away without consequences. It's actually something that's happening a lot more because they've got a young brain. It's not fully formed, and you know what? Maybe the guy's got $100. That's okay. You know, I'll take his wallet. And some of these guys are carrying guns. This is downtown. Michigan Avenue. I went to Hinda. I was at the Decalogue Society for Hinda, representing Hinda. Decalogue is Jewish lawyers last Wednesday night. And we got out at 8:30, and I'm going to do what I always do, take the Green Line home, because that's what I've done for the last 30 years, all right? I go up on the train tracks, and I see 3 young kids walk by me, pretending not to look at me, looking like they're talking about me. Now, my intuition was saying, get off this train track. There were people around. Train comes, I go, what up? And I said, you know what? Don't listen to me. And as I walked by and like went down the steps, I looked at them and I smiled and I shook my head. And their reaction to me told me that they thought I was going to be fresh meat to rob on the train. I've never had that before. In the 40 years I've lived in Chicago, and I used to travel when I was young in all sorts of neighborhoods. I never had. What I felt is that those guys, they thought, okay, you know, white guy on a train, even though I had an umbrella, which I was holding like that. And I kind of felt, I never saw that before. But I think it's a problem because those kids, their brains are not, they're thinking, okay, I got some money here. That's what they're thinking. I'm not thinking them as evil, terrible people. They're not trying to kill, but they see that there's money there to be get, and they feel free because they're not thinking about the consequences of, you know, of strong arm robbery, of which what it is. It's what a mugging is. But there's more of this right now. It's a problem. But I have seen the benefit of looking at brain chemistry. I had a client who was 15 years old when he was found guilty of killing 2 people, 2 life sentences. Because he was 15, a case said that he needed to be reevaluated under all sorts of things. I put forth his resentencing, and I got it cut down to 30. He's out, all right? He would have been, but unfortunately, his co-defendant, we think these guys, by the way, are actually innocent. We 100% believe he's actually innocent for factors I don't want to get into now, but these guys are innocent. They were hanging around gangbanging, but they were innocent of what this crime was. His co-defendant, unfortunately, was 18 and a half, which means he wasn't considered a minor, which means he didn't get the resentencing, and he's going to unfortunately he will be spending the rest of his life in prison. He's been in jail for 25 years. Sad, very sad. The fact that someone was 18 years old and they committed a robbery, does that make a difference from the 30 and they're applying for a job? All right. Okay. Given that if they haven't done anything since, unlikely to do it again. Unlikely to do it at 25. I mean, the criminal background check is like, is this person likely to do it again? All right, it's a particular thing, and so this is just statistics that lawyers like myself have been trying to put the forefront. But this would be really more, I think, about background checks, because again, Jewish law forbids relaying negative information about what you did unless it is necessary to harm other. Like, so example, if there was a teacher who maybe abused a student, that might be very valuable if someone is a teacher and want to go and apply to do the same kind of thing, perhaps. And I don't know. And again, that could be valuable information. That's particular. Same thing. All right. So that's Jewish law is about need to know, not to society's some general right to know, need. And therefore, we believe that employers should be provided with criminal background information only on the need to know basis, specific relevance, particular employees. And after passage of time, when the ex-offender no longer presents elevated risk, information about past offenses should be concealed. You know what? Jewish law says you can't discriminate against reformed ex-offenders because they've done teshuvah. And we should always encourage people to try to change their ways. How do we know? They haven't been rearrested, all right? So it's the Jewish law that we're teaching is about teshuvah and rehabilitation. It is very different than the punitive system in our country, which is society needs to know everything because there's some information that should not be needed to know. I'll take a question before we close up. Arya, or comment, Arya, please, and we'll close up today. Because by age 20, you've got some brain. This Jewish law, as you know, as Linda says, this is thousands of years ago that we know this. That you're a different person at 20 than you are at 16 and 17 and 18. So, you know, it's interesting. We're told about why was the temple destroyed. First temple was destroyed because there was bloodshed, there was immorality, and then there was also worship of idols. In the second temple, we didn't do that. We studied Torah, we did all these things, but there was something called sinat hinam, or they said baseless hatred. How did that baseless hatred get spread? Because we're now in the 3 weeks, we're in the 9 days. Tisha B'Av is next Wednesday. We're not meeting next Wednesday. We're meeting the following Wednesday, August 2nd. How do we see how sinat hinam is done? It's by lashon hara. When someone is speaking badly about another, they are obviously not. They are not showing their fellow love. There are exceptions, as we would always say. The exceptions are very limited, very carefully done. Jewish law is very careful about when you are allowed to say true things that badly impact, that affects them, but it's very limited. And the way that we build the temple is by ahavat chinam, loving freely. And that means watching what we say. You guys have been the victims about things said about you, the background checks that had nothing to do with what you did and how long ago. You're all victims of this. You've got family members too. Bless us as we finish, and I'm going to sign off now. Sorry, we'll learn in 2 weeks, Jeremy. But I bless us all that in this final week, as we get ready to Tisha B'Av, that we reflect upon ourselves and reflect upon how lashon hara has damaged us in criminal background checks that are much too broad, much too wide, and have affected us negatively. We need to get a system of Jewish law based on this in the future. I got to sign off because I've got to go. I wish you all a good week, and I'll see you in 2 weeks, God willing. Have a great night. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Edmund.
If you want to stay on to talk with Michael, you're more than welcome to do so. Okay, please. I got to go, though.
Or amongst one another.
Yes.
I think we all have ideas that we can share, understandings, experiences. So we can all take ourselves off mute if you want to stay. Good link. Thank you, Lisa, for that. I guess she's gone now, but I don't know if you saw that. National Reentry Resource Center. You see that link? Site. And what I like about what you said is it recognizes how human beings actually work instead of having this fixed idea that once you commit any error, you are therefore forever defined by that error. That learning from and overcoming that past event is either not possible or, even worse in a way, not relevant. We don't care that you've done 27 amazing things, have saved the lives of people from a burning building, have invented a cure for cancer, have started a business that employs 100 people in your community on a sustainable model. Because you did X, Y number of years ago, you can't join the good people. It's I actually think it derives from the Puritan idea of the elect, but that might be a bit of an exaggeration. But I can't help but thinking that there's some relationship there philosophically and religiously.
That makes sense.
You're either perfect or you're nothing.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if you remember what the Puritan ethos was and the doctrine of the elect under Calvin, who was the foundational Puritan, really, 144,000 people are chosen in the world every generation to ascend to heaven. We don't know. We cannot know who they are. But if you are to be considered as a possible candidate, then everything you do has to be right all the time. These are smaller countries that tend to be more homogeneous and therefore simpler to govern in many ways. But nonetheless, even Germany, which is much larger than any Scandinavian country in size of population and has a much more complex and diverse population, even they have policies that are far more and commensurate with a true restorative approach than American. I mean, the Anglo world, frankly, is the worst. Australia, New Zealand, Canada, South Africa. It's very interesting how consistent that is. Much less true